Hey guys, welcome back to another video in the r/entitledparents subreddit. Today I have one entitled parent story for you. Just one, but boy oh boy is it something else. In this story, poor OP has to live with her freeloading entitled aunt and brat cousins that keep destroying her things, and instead of owning up to their actions or being disciplined, the entitled aunt blames it on a poltergeist. That's right, she blames it on ghosts. Perhaps it's actually true and they all live at the Conjuring house? I don't know. Let's just jump into the story. Entitled Aunt claims we have a poltergeist rather than admit that her kid destroyed my things. So, the story requires some background. My aunt, the entitled aunt in question, who I'll just refer to as Kay, has 3 sons who were 1, 5, and 8 at the time of this story. The younger 2 don't play much of a part in this story. Kay is, and always was, emotionally abusive, and willingly sat by and watched as her husband, D for Dick, was physically abusive to her and her children. Over the course of about 15 years, she was on and off with D and always said she was going to leave him, but never did, and always went back in the end. Almost every single time she left, she always came crawling back to my mother and father seeking salvation, and they always begrudgingly welcomed her back. When this story takes place, Kay had once again left D, promising that she was leaving for the final time, and my family took her and her boys in. Things were off to a bad start immediately, and there were multiple events leading up to the poltergeist fiasco. The first event happened when I went to the restroom and saw that an expensive lipstick of mine was smeared all over the mirror and sink, and the actual tube was destroyed. I am by no means a beauty guru or anything like that. However, I think I'm pretty decent at makeup and have a few choice things that are relatively pricey, all of which have been gifts. The lipstick in question was about $50 and had been a gift from a deceased friend, and it was honestly a bit sentimental. I completely understand that kids will be kids and stuff like that is bound to happen, so I think when stuff like this happens, what you should do is sit down with your kid and tell them that stuff like that isn't okay, right? Well, no, apparently not. Prior to this, Kay had always had the "my child can do no wrong" mentality, so I was already expecting her to avoid blame or to not do anything, but I thought I should address it anyway. I went and told her that one of her kids had destroyed an expensive lipstick of mine, and that, though I know kids will be kids, I'd appreciate it if she'd have a word with them about not touching my things. Immediately, she was adamant that her children would never do something like that, and that it must have been our great-grandmother, N, who lived 3 stories down and can't climb stairs. Later, I learned that she went and cried to my grandmother, who is also extremely entitled, claiming that I hate her and her children and that I like to blame them for everything. Her boys had been prone to destroying/stealing things in the past and had been caught red-handed multiple times. This annoyed the ever-loving crap out of me, to say the least, so I asked my mom to talk to her and I let it slide. About a week later, my oldest cousin went upstairs to use the restroom and was in there for a remarkable amount of time. I went up about 5 minutes after he'd left and found the exact same lipstick smeared everywhere again, some brushes literally chopped to pieces, and a limited edition palette ripped apart and scattered everywhere. Should note that at this point I hadn't actually found the tube of the lipstick this time, and I assumed he'd taken it or thrown it away. Another week or so later, I found it shoved into a bag of pads with an expensive lipstick-covered watch. I went and got Kay to show her the scene, and she once again was positive that it couldn't have been her son, even though he'd locked himself in there for almost an hour. She then got upset and said that I blamed everything on her kids, etc., and that it was probably N, before going and crying in her room, literally left all 3 children alone downstairs and expected us to watch them. I went directly to my mom because I was honestly pissed, and I asked her to deal with it before I blew up at Kay. She said she would, and she had a talk with Kay about disciplining her sons later that night. The next day is when it starts to get fun. I went into the kitchen to find Kay standing there looking dejected and visibly drunk. She sighed and said, "I'm sorry about your makeup, but it honestly wasn't C. She then went on about how he hadn't left her side all day that day, which everyone knew was false, and then looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I think we have a poltergeist, and I think it's targeting C for some reason." She went on for about 10 minutes talking about every single thing he or his brothers had done, insisting that it had never been them all along, and it had always been this ghost. I was absolutely floored. Whether ghosts are real or not, whatever. But I can damn assure you that if we'd had a poltergeist, I would have known about it. Honestly, I wasn't looking for a fight this day, and I just rolled my eyes and went back upstairs. Later, G came to me furious, saying that I'd been absolutely horrible to Kay and that I'd made her cry. I got upset at this point and said that I wasn't going to let her manipulate me because she's too damn stupid and entitled to admit her son had destroyed my things. Kay heard this from upstairs and called my mother to say that I was treating her horribly and that her son hadn't even done anything wrong. Unfortunately, this sequence of events only persisted for about a month and only continued to get worse. While all of this was playing out, Kay and the kids were making everyone's lives living hell in multiple ways and completely overtook and destroyed our house, even though she was no more than a guest. The final straw in this scenario was when I had found 2 lipsticks and a very sentimental necklace absolutely destroyed and torn apart after C had spent another hour in there. I lost my effing mind and went immediately to Kay and called her out for C's constant behavior, and that if she didn't put a stop to it, I would lose my absolute crap with her. For about an hour or two, she paced around the house exclaiming about how we were all horrible and mistreating her and blaming everything on her kids when it couldn't possibly have been them, and how it's a poltergeist, and that we were all just skeptics even though this supposed poltergeist had been terrorizing them for years. I just had to sit through all of this because she wouldn't let me speak. Then she legitimately called an exorcist. She exclaimed to him that we were being terrorized by a poltergeist and that it's targeting her child and that now she's probably going to be kicked out and put on the street over some goddamn lipstick that her son didn't even destroy, and so much more. This whole situation just blew my effing mind, and I just sat there and listened and watched as she victimized herself and completely crap talked me and my family to an exorcist. Eventually, my mother stepped in and put a stop to the madness, and I don't know exactly what happened after that. I know that my mom went off on her at the very least. Over the next few days, Kay completely ignored us and wouldn't even address what happened before one day when she stopped me on the way out of the house and mumbled a sort of snarky apology. In the end, my makeup never got replaced, and I never really got a substantial apology, but I was less upset about the monetary value and overall just the principle of the things. Kay and the kids moved out about 2 months later because D got out of prison. She moved back in later that year after leaving D again, and then last year moved out to get back with D. Since then, Kay pretty much destroyed her relationships with everyone, and we've all since cut contact, and she is never welcome back in our lives. Jesus. So glad OP and her family cut contact with that psycho. They're honestly better off. Imagine though if entitled aunt and her kids weren't lying and they're actually being terrorized by a demon, but no one believes her. Then they find out it was actually true and someone makes a movie about it and names it A Nightmare on EM Street. That's pretty unlikely though, and I'm going to say that entitled mom just has some psychological issues, and I honestly do hope for the best for that family, especially the kids, and that they all get the help and counseling that they need. Anyways, I do hope that you enjoyed that entitled parent story. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. I truly appreciate when you do, and I will see you in the next Reddit story. Bye!